I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton.
And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club,
the podcast where we read celebrity memoirs so that nobody else has to. Unless, of course, you want to, then go ahead and read them. If you say, oh, I'd rather you guys just tell me what happens here. Well, we're gonna.
And Ashley.
Yes, Claire?
Are you anywhere special this week?
I'm about to be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for a live show at City Winery on April 10th. And then we're going to go to DC the next day, April 11th. Where do you think you're going to go after that?
I personally am going to go to San Francisco and then Chicago and then Dublin and London and then finish up in New York City.
Wow. And what's happening in these cities?
Tour. And if you guys want to be a part of the March Madness, we recommend it. We believe in it. And we would love to see you guys there. And if not, me and Ashley could just hang out alone.
It's something we'd love to do, but we're inviting you to our hangs.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Claire, what's something you recommend this week?
I've been listening to top to bottom.
What?
I've been training for this half marathon. It's April 27th, I think. So I've got to fucking, I got to get cooking. But
I think you've been cooking.
I've been cooking, but not with gas,
I think you've at least been cooking with like Arizona sunlight.
Yeah, when you can fry an egg on the ground. I've been listening to Reputation by Taylor Swift, top to bottom. And then when I really need a push at the end, I listen to Blackout, top to bottom. And then I have a reserve of like my favorite Beyonce and Carly Rae Jepsen's. And I have to say, those are the only 4 people I'll listen to when I run.
Do you know who I listen to when I run right now?
What?
You know that viral Tiny Desk concert by Catriel and Paco Amorosa? The one that's like, La que puede. It's a really good Tiny Desk concert. I don't know if I'm saying their names right. No, but I listened to their album.
Oh.
And a lot of people were like, oh, it sounds so different than the Tiny Desk concert. And it does sound very different, but it's a sound that I love to run to. Because I listened to the Tiny Desk concert and I said, that's a really great Tiny Desk concert. And then I turned on the album and I said, this sounds, obviously quite different because it's a completely different arrangement, but also in a different way is awesome.
I love it.
Anyway, I'm excited for your half mare.
Yeah, wish me luck, guys. I hope I finish. I hope I get there. I hope I start. Can I tell you, many years I've not started.
I guess that's where I will let you have it. I'll give that one to you. I think if you start, there's no chance you don't finish.
But there's a good chance I don't start.
There's not a good chance you don't start, but there is a chance you don't start. And that chance hangs with the weatherman.
I'm excited. I'm excited to stick with my word. I can't wait to see if I've become a woman of my word.
I'm really going to put pressure on you to start. And then I believe you'll be able to get yourself to the finish.
Fingers crossed. And Ashley, do you have any recommendations this week?
Okay, there's this TV show. I don't know if anyone...
Are you going to say Dr. Odyssey?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say Survivor.
Oh, is it new?
I don't know if anyone's really heard of it, but I'll tell you what. One of the things that kept me from starting Survivor for a very long time was not understanding it because there's like a whole I feel like I'm learning a new language. Like there is a universe of Survivor that I cannot possibly comprehend, but like I'm getting it. I'm figuring it out. You get why it's been on. You watch it and you go, oh, well, they really cracked the code.
The code of good TV.
They really came up with something.
It's so funny because now they have Traitors, which is like, what if we took Survivor and made only half of it make sense?
Yeah, I feel like Traitors is what if there was no stakes and only people who are already famous.
Yeah, and Survivors is all stakes, no fame.
Yeah.
Listen, you know me, I love a first season reality TV competition. I love it before they figured out the game. I hate a spinoff.
So Deal or No Deal Island is not for you.
Not for me. Or the 90 Day Fiancé spinoffs, but the 90 Day Fiancé proper, Prime.
What is the difference between the spinoffs and the Prime?
Well, they start on Prime, and then if they're fan favorites, they get spinoffs. And at which point they're like no longer just regular people married to strangers, they're celebrities.
Ugh, you hate to see a celebrity.
Lord knows I hate a celebrity. Anyway, getting into this week's book.
We do like this celebrity. Diane Guerrero wrote a book called In the Country We Love, My Family Divided.
She is the star of Orange is the New Black. She was also known for her role in Jane the Virgin, and she also was one of the voices in Encanto. Did you watch Orange is the New Black?
I did not watch it all the way through, but I remember when it started. I definitely watched the first 2 or 3 seasons.
Did you like it?
I mean, yeah, it was a
hit, no?
It was a hit. It was a very, I feel like, revolutionary show at the time, obviously being, I think, the first mega Netflix original. It definitely like obviously spiraled out of control a bit, but I think it started off with a bang. I also was a big, what's her name, Genji Koner fan.
Weeds.
I'm a mega Weeds head, man. I loved that show.
God, when I think of Weeds, I think of being bedridden sophomore year of college for no other reason than I wasn't getting out of the bed. I watched a lot of Weeds. We had a lot of Diet Cokes together, me and that Mary Louise Parker.
God, does she sip a soda? God, is she sipping sodas on that show? So yeah, I definitely like knew who she was from that show. And I remember hearing of her story when she wrote her op-ed. And I love Jane the Virgin. That's the best show. So the story opens up with the day she arrived home from just a regular day at high school to find that her parents had been taken away by ICE.
For those of you who are not U.S. listeners, that stands for the Immigration Customs Enforcement, and they're like the police officers of essentially the border.
Yeah.
And they're pretty fucking evil, I'd say. Like, they're uniquely cruel and without law.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels like a pretty lawless entity.
Like any sense of due process that ever existed is being ripped out of it right now by the current Trump administration.
Yeah, it's always been, I think, quite a cruel contingent. And now in recent months, worse than it's ever been, which is like especially sad coming out of like the hope and the efforts that have been made over the last decade or so to make it less fucked up.
Chapter 1. My mom was making me late, and I hated to be late, especially for a school I loved, and most especially when I was preparing for my first solo. It was a big deal for a freshman to land a solo. Huge, actually. In fact, even getting into Boston Arts Academy had been a miracle. It was my ticket out of the hood.
So she's rushing off to school. She loves her school, the Boston Arts Academy. She runs to the train.
Her dad the night before had actually won the lotto, which was, he had won $10,000. Not a crazy amount of money, mind you, a few $1,000, but for us, it was the jackpot. And on top of that, the love was flowing again in our house. My 4-year-old niece, who had been away from our family since my older brother Eric and his wife had separated, was back to spending time at our place. I saw it as a sign that things were looking up, that better times were coming.
So she heads off to school. On her way home from school, she decides her dad had given her $50 when he won the lottery, and she decides to stop and buy some new shoes. And then she gets home and finds her house completely empty.
I reassured myself they've got to be here. I rushed up to our porch and pulled out my set of keys, rifling through them until I found the silver one. I slid it into the deadbolt, held my breath, and tried to brace myself for what I'd find beyond the door. I still can't believe what I found.
So now we zoom back in her life. Her mom, mommy, and poppy, as she called them, were extremely hardworking people from Colombia.
I'll just say, she has photos of her and her family throughout the book, and she was the cutest little kid.
Yeah.
She was just really, really adorable. Her parents both came from like large families in Colombia. They actually grew up a couple blocks away from each other, but didn't meet until their 20s. And they both had come from situations that were very stressful and economically difficult. Her father, both of his parents had died, leaving him to become the kind of de facto parent of his 6 or 7 siblings. Her mother was in a similar situation where a lot of people had passed away in her large family, that there were not a lot of job opportunities. The country did not have a lot of room for growth. And if you didn't already have money, you were kind of screwed. There was no upward mobility.
So her mom had set out to become a teacher after graduating high school and was setting out to do a program at a local university, and she fell in love. She ends up getting pregnant by this man and then finding out that he already has a family. He's already married. He already has children. And so now at, 17 or 18, she was a single mother to Diane's older brother, Eric. When Eric was young, she ended up meeting Diane's father in town, and they fell in love.
Practically from the moment she laid eyes on him up close, Mommy knew she wanted to be with my dad. He was handsome, fit, and olive-toned as he was charming and reserved, a perfect balance for my mother's outgoing personality. Poppy wasn't one to settle down, but my mom put in the work to bag it up.
So they weren't specifically intent on coming to the U.S., but they were looking for a way to provide, for their family. They really wanted better opportunities, and Diane's mom's sister had moved to New Jersey.
They had been granted permanent residence. Mommy, who had visited my aunt numerous times with my brother in tow, saw an abundance of opportunities there, a place far from her crippling losses.
So they come to the U.S. on a 4-year visitor's visa.
And her mom is like, let's just stay here and figure out how to make it work. Like, we can't go back. There's nothing for us there. And we've just started to make a name for ourselves here. That's why from the minute their visas expired, they began strategizing about how they could become citizens.
They also ended up deciding to expand their family. They ended up having Diane.
On July 21st, 1986, I entered the world with a privilege that has shaped my entire existence. Because I was born on U.S. soil, I received a right guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of our Constitution, citizenship.
So Eric, the older brother, is not doing great in America. My brother fell into an emotional slump. He couldn't see a future for himself in this country. It's nearly impossible to dream big when you don't even have your legal papers. So he's pretty regularly getting in with the wrong crowd.
He's getting into a lot of fights with the stepfathers. Even though Diane's father loves her very much, it seems like he makes it clear that this is his daughter and you're his stepson. They're fighting a lot. That puts a strain on the parents' relationship. And meanwhile, when Diane is only like 1 year old, they decide to move to Boston because they have friends up there and they hear there's like better opportunities.
She talks about how much it hung over their heads at all times, that at any moment, the parents and Eric could be deported. At one point, her parents are fighting and she says, I'm going to call the cops. And her mom says, go ahead, call the cops. They can come and send us back to Colombia. They'll take us away from you. So it's just this ever-present, lingering knowing that at any moment they could be ripped apart.
But it wasn't until then that she had realized that with a single phone call, I could lose them. For the first time, Mommy had spilled the truth.
We followed the first commandment of life under the radar. Do nothing that might bring the cops to your doorstep. Our lives revolved around my parents' quest for citizenship. Nearly every week, Mommy and Poppy strategized about how to get their papers. So one of the big problems that we see constantly is that there is, especially before the internet, but honestly, I'm sure the internet in other ways makes it very easy in different ways to scam the shit out of people. But there was no clear path forward for people who were currently in this country illegally. And there still is no clear path forward for people who are currently in this country illegally.
Mm-hmm. And to make matters worse, like you need to hire legal representation, which is very expensive. And so they're doing everything they can to kind of stay housed and fed month to month. And on top of that, they're figuring out how to get extra jobs to make extra money to go to lawyers to help them with this process while staying under the radar. It's like a very impossible situation. And it's like you don't know who to go to for good information because like you can't go to the government and say, how am I supposed to do this? You'll tip yourself off to them.
Yeah. As much as my dad respected this country, he also had a deep mistrust of the system. He honestly believed if he presented himself to the authorities, he'd be handcuffed immediately and deported for having overstayed his visa. So there's also just constantly rumors and misinformation, and it's really hard to parse out like what you actually are supposed to do, like what is the correct process. And then the lawyers who are helping you with those processes, most of them could just be scammers.
So in the spring of 1997, a friend of a friend is passing out a business card for this Harvard lawyer who's going to help them get their documentation. They were like, okay, this is it. And the father is going to go ahead first. For some reason, it was felt that he would be a better first person to do it than the mother.
Mm-hmm. The mom had also started the process when they first came to America and were living in New Jersey. And so she said, well, if you're going to go ahead with this Harvard lawyer guy, I'll reopen my case that I had started in New Jersey. And the dad is like, that's a treacherous idea.
I guess, can I tell you, this is something that I didn't understand. I feel like there was never really clarity on like who was right and who was wrong here.
It's hard to tell how much of it was the truth and how much of it was like the classic, my dad's an angel and my mom has fucked everything up.
In this book, there's a lot of blame on the mother because I think it's like the mom who pushed this idea of coming to the States in the first place. It was her idea to try and become citizens, pass their visa. And then also, I think she was the extrovert. She was the one building a life and making community. Something Diane loves about her childhood is they had so many neighbors that it seems like they had extended family. They had great food and music and like they didn't have much, but they had this very like rich social, cultural family life that was so fun and they celebrated holidays. And unfortunately, these things that I think her mom did to try to make her life more joyful and family oriented, they also saw as a liability. Mm-hmm. Like everything she did to reach out to the neighbors, to reach out to the community was seen as like making herself too known. She was out in public a lot. Meanwhile, the father was very quiet and a homebody. It's tough. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
So they start working with this lawyer
who says he's going to be $300 an hour. And the dad's like, well, I can't afford that. And they said, fine, $700 down payment and we'll work the rest out later. And he goes, I can give you $500. And they're like, deal. Give us $500 and just keep giving us money.
Yeah. So he gives them $500 and then forever, like for years, they're scraping together money and giving him installments of $500. She also talks about getting bullied in her neighborhood.
There's a lot of like racism, even though she lives in a mostly like Hispanic neighborhood.
But there's like racism between Hispanic countries.
In our area, which was mostly filled with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, anybody who wasn't in one of those two groups was usually considered a dirty immigrant. We were spat on, cursed at, looked down upon, and perceived as unattractive because of our indigenous Indian features. I know. Other Latino groups look similar. That goes to show how stupid discrimination is. Can I say another thing that she blames her mom for that I'm I don't know that was wrong? She talks about starting in kindergarten, mommy thought it was a good idea to put me in bilingual classes. She wanted me to learn to read and write in both Spanish and English. To this day, I don't think that was right for me. Yes, I got a little of both languages, but I never really mastered either of them. Thanks, Mom. I did, however, discover my first musical love, jazz. I don't think that that's your mom's fault. I think most people are, what do you mean you haven't mastered English? I'm reading your book. What do you mean?
I mean, you're an actress in both English and Spanish, actually.
What are you talking about? You haven't mastered either language. She later finds out she has dyslexia. And I'm well, that's not your mom's fault.
Yeah.
You were already being, I'm sure, exposed to Spanish at home since your parents spoke Spanish. I can't imagine that this set you back.
Yeah. I think this one was a bit of a lob at the mom. So Eric, the older brother, ends up getting his girlfriend pregnant and then getting married. And they have a baby named Erica. And then Gloria, Eric's wife, files the papers to sponsor him for citizenship. And this really helps him out of the kind of slump that he's been in. Now he has a daughter to provide for. He's really showing up, being present. They all live with Diane's parents. So she's so happy to have her baby niece there.
Named Erica. I feel like I've seen this on 16 I'm Pregnant. This is a very common pattern. The baby is born. There's a few good months where the dad's really excited. And then you find out that baby's just going to keep being alive forever. And you're going to have to keep working hard and caring for it. And then people get a bit desperate. She says, I was a daddy's girl through and through. Mommy and I were tight as well, but Poppy and I have always had this special connection. For starters, we're both ultra sensitive. They would go to the beach together every weekend. They made every celebration special. I mean, despite their circumstances and this kind of lingering fear, her parents really did love her and do everything they could for her.
Mm-hmm. And so she would go with her dad to visit the lawyer so that she could translate and make sure that everything was just being handled correctly, because the lawyer was an American but spoke some Spanish and her dad was Colombian and spoke some English. So she was just there to bridge the gap.
And that was very typical for her. She was the family translator. She said she would go with them to fill out bank statements, doctor's visits. She, as a little girl, was their number one translator. My parents raised me Catholic. Like most Colombians, Mommy and Poppy have been brought up in the faith and were intent on passing the traditions to me. She is a very determined little Catholic girl. By middle school, I had taken the whole good Catholic girl thing to its highest level. She was very intense, and this I just think is her personality. She says if she did something bad, she would go home. If I rolled my eyes at my teacher, I'd rush home, lock the bathroom door, cry, and then slap myself or pull my hair. It was my way of doling out punishment on myself before God could step in and do it. If I sought God fervently enough, if I lived according to his principles and never strayed, he would reward my faithfulness by protecting my family. I believe that with all my heart. Every good Catholic girl does.
Sad.
No.
So her mom is going through this process in the fall of 1997 to restart her citizenship process that she had started in New Jersey. Mommy connected with a lawyer in Boston who reached out to the lawyer in New Jersey who pulled her file. We still have your paperwork, the New Jersey lawyer told Mommy, but it was never actually submitted to immigration. You just have to give us some updates and we'll get started on your case again. Her dad is extremely suspicious of this whole process. He says, how do they already know that it was or wasn't submitted? Why don't you just wait till I do my papers and then we can look into it? But the mom was like, I want to go ahead now. So she starts 6th grade.
And she goes to a public school that's not very good. She says that a lot of the time was spent on the children who were acting out the most. A lot of kids were dropping out. There wasn't enough teachers. It was just a tough situation to be in, but she made the most of it. Meanwhile, at home, her mom starts having kind of scary instances. She sees a man poking around the house who doesn't announce himself, and she just locks the doors and closes the blinds.
And then she comes home from school one day and her mom has been detained and is going to be deported.
No, Eric said, shaking his head from side to side. She's not dead. Immigration came and took her. So she leaves. It's just her, Eric, and her father. Things are really tough. Eric and the father are fighting a lot. Nobody knows what to expect. Meanwhile, she's still going to school and they have no idea what's going on with her. She is very quiet, I think, because she was raised you can't tell anybody about your parents' documentation status. Obviously, the fewer people who know, the better, the safer. She's just this 12-year-old girl at school going through hell at home, and she doesn't tell anybody.
I also think this is where some of her resentment with her mom comes from. Mm-hmm. Her mom calls her and says, well, why don't you just move to Colombia with me?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you built me a whole life here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things that's stopping her from going with her mom is that she thinks her brother and her dad are going to kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I have to keep the peace at home. If you're not here, someone has to help these boys. And then also, she's been raised to believe that like getting to America is the dream, and she has citizenship.
She's never even been to Colombia. So it's not even a question of like, which life do you want to keep living? It's like,
you have one life and then a complete unknown.
And when you're 11, like a move across town seems like the end of the world. To go back to a country you've never been to. In the following days, as I watched my father slide from devastation into despondence, one thing became clear to me. Poppy blamed Mommy for her arrest. And if I'm being honest about it, so did I. Behind his closed bedroom door, Poppy argued with my mother nightly. Why hadn't she left well enough alone? Why did she need to go sniffing around for those papers? Why hadn't she listened to him? And why did she have to go around being the neighborhood socialite, letting anyone and everyone know our business? You're too open, he told me, just too damn friendly.
I'd always known there was a possibility that one or both of my parents would be taken, but what was the contingency plan? You have to be strong, Poppy would always tell me. I got that part, but what would happen after I put on a stiff upper lip?
Mommy had been away for a little over 2 months when Poppy came home with some news. Your mother's coming back, he told me. I glared at him. What? She found a way to get back into the country, he said blankly. Neither Mommy nor Poppy told me the specifics of how she managed to get back across the border. To this day, I still don't know for sure, but I did know that only a mother who refused to live separately from her family would take the risk of returning.
And then a week later, she's arrested again.
So they move. At this point, Poppy's like, this is really bad. Eric actually ends up moving to New Jersey for a fresh start. So Eric leaves, and now it's just Diane and her father, and they move to like a little basement apartment. And she's like, I don't know, there was fewer of us, but still, it was not a happy place to be. She was like, it was a really gross basement. We had to sell most of our stuff. Anything that we couldn't sell, we just had to put in a box. It was a tough time.
It was just during such an important part of her childhood. She needs a bra, and so she has to go with her dad to buy her first bra. She gets her period, and so she has to like learn about pads and period stuff from her dad.
And at school, still no one knows. And so she's struggling at school. Teachers can tell that she's tired. They're calling her dad and being like, we don't know what's wrong. Her grades are slipping. And it's just like she's suffering in silence. She has a few really good friends, though, that she knows from the neighborhood, and they know what's going on with her. But it's a very lonely time for Diane. And then she came back for the second time in January 1999, not to Boston this time, but to New Jersey. I have no idea whether she told Poppy she was coming. If she did, he certainly didn't pass along the good tidings. She moved in with her sister's son, my cousin, whom I love very much. So they go to visit her, and now there's this fear of like, they're obviously onto you. If we let you back into the house, they're going to find me. They're trying to decide whether or not they should leave for New Jersey, if they should stay in Boston, and they ultimately decide to move but stay in Boston. They argued, but with Eric gone, there was a lot less to fight about. Poppy was still feeling quite hopeful about the lawyer. He'd assured us that even with Mommy's troubles, he could continue moving forward with Poppy's case. And I was loving my room. Because we were in a different house and I hoped out of the reach of ice, I felt safe enough to actually sleep at night. Maybe I had done something right, something good, something pleasurable to the Father above.
The weight of this stuff on a kid is like one of the more treacherous things I can think of. For her to like be sitting there wondering if she was like in good standing with God and therefore could like live with her parents. Damn.
It's just like the constant fear. And like having to live a life where you can't really go out in public.
So because of her undiagnosed dyslexia and ADD, she is not great at school. And because she lives in a city, she's applying to a bunch of magnet schools.
And private schools.
And not getting into any.
She is besides herself. She's crying at the counselor's office. And suddenly the counselor goes, oh, I've got a great idea. What about this new performing school, Boston Arts Academy? The auditions are in a couple weeks. You still have time. You could go. She is an incredible jazz singer. She is somebody who has found a lot of jazz. She specifically loves Sarah Vaughan. She's like, I love the way that they take their troubles and turn it into art. I'm sure she has an incredible voice. I guess she was in Encanto. Yeah. I wonder if she sang in it. I would guess, right?
Probably, right?
Anyway, so she auditions. She doesn't even really tell anybody that she's practicing for this just because at such a young age, she's really mastered the ability to like keep things to herself. She's very independent, unfortunately. I feel like in a way, you know what I mean?
I do feel like this whole growing up with this, don't tell anyone about your parents' citizenship status. And then in her like adolescence, having this whole situation of like, your mom is back and forth from being deported. Don't tell anyone about that. I feel like she like really, really internalized compartmentalization.
Meanwhile, Eric was doing well in New Jersey, at least at first. He got a couple handyman gigs. He was working on getting his GED. But unfortunately, as he was leaving a convenience store one day, he was jumped. These guys surrounded him, pummeling his head with their fists. Eric, who thought he was being robbed, desperately tried to defend himself by flinging his toolbox at them. A passerby called 911. When the police arrived, they arrested all four. Although the other 3 guys had been at the perpetrators, they pressed assault charges against Eric. A court date was set. So what ends up happening is the public defender assigned to Eric tells him just to say he was stalking them for some reason. I guess it's only considered like a minor felony. He won't get jail time. He can walk away. So
it's a misdemeanor.
Oh, a misdemeanor. So that he can walk away. But what they didn't know is that if you are
undocumented,
it's not actually considered a misdemeanor. It is called a felony, and you can be deported for it. Days after he scrawled his signature on that plea, Eric was shackled, put into a detention center, and shipped back to Colombia. It all happened so quickly that Mommy, Poppy, and I didn't get to visit him before his departure. I last saw my brother in this country in 1999, the spring of my 8th grade year. I mean, this is obviously crushing to his parents who have lost him now. He has a child. That child will never really be able to have a present father.
Yeah, he was living in New Jersey to like get his shit together and come back. And
I don't know, like kids make mistakes. Like at this point, I think he's still like 19, 20 years old.
He was 19, 20 years old and like brought to America when he was just a little kid. So her dad is still making payments to this lawyer and not really hearing from him anymore. And after Eric gets deported and like the mom has now been deported twice, the dad is hyper focused on getting his permanent residence papers in order. And he's not hearing from this lawyer anymore. And so he says, Diane, we got to go down there. They go down there. The office is empty. It was a complete sham. They'd been giving thousands of dollars
over the course of years to this man.
To this man who, when they talked, the guy would say, yep, things are coming along. Everything's getting in order. Things are looking good.
Later at home, in a moment I'd wish upon no child, I saw my Poppy, my rock, crumble before my eyes. Why? He said over and over. He kept rubbing his head in disbelief. He simply could not believe that he'd been taken advantage of in this way, especially in front of his little girl. So emasculating. What kind of hope could he offer his family? His daughter? Seeing my father in that state broke my heart. My sweet dad had been hoodwinked by this monster. I really think that there is like a circle of hell. Like he should be deported to hell for stealing from an undocumented, like from somebody who is just trying their hardest and is so vulnerable, from somebody who has like no course of action. To steal from just like a father trying to be there for his daughter is one of the most fucked up things. Like I can't even fathom going to sleep at night and waking up every day and continuing it. Like, could you imagine living that life every day, just stealing from people?
I can't imagine living that life one day, let alone every day.
Like every day going into your office where you steal from people who have the least.
Vulnerable people who are in so much danger.
It's so evil. It turns out that the woman who had put him in touch with that man had been getting like a kickback, and for everybody she got sent to him, she got $500. Later that night, I could feel his pain through the walls that separated our rooms. He wept not just for himself, but for me. How could he protect me if he couldn't protect himself? My father felt helpless, and on that evening, as I struggled to get some sleep, so did I.
So she gets into the Boston Arts Academy, and this is a real bright spot in her entire childhood. She fucking loves it there. She starts in the fall, and she like loves going to school for the first time in her life. Like every day she's excited to wake up and go to school.
I think something that I see a lot in these memoirs that like makes me feel so sad for what's happening today is the importance of like arts funding in schools, especially in public schools. She talks about how the exposure to the Boston Symphony, they had artists like Spike Lee and Yo-Yo Ma visited the campus and offered talks. I was blown away by the opportunity, the access, the exposure. Simply being in that environment lifted my expectations for what was possible in my life, even with the uncertainty at home. I mean, she had this one place she got to go and be so, like, she loved school. She was waking up early to get there on time. She was able to become the actress she is because she knew it was possible because she could see it every day.
And even before she went to the Boston Arts Academy, her like middle school, public school had, she says, pretty good extracurriculars from public funding. Without that, she wouldn't have even known like about going to art school.
For her to be able to go and practice jazz because she's aware of jazz takes like teachers in the room telling you about jazz. And it's just so important to like allow children from every background to have a well-rounded education and like exposure to what dreams can be. And it is just like the most fucked up thing to rip from a school classroom.
Yeah.
Ugh, AI.
Math is on calculators.
Yeah. Jazz is in your soul. You have to develop the soul.
So she loves Boston Arts Academy. She's so obsessed with the school. She's so obsessed with, you know, like doing schoolwork in the morning and then performing all afternoon and learning all new types of performance. And then she gets offered a solo in the like annual recital or something.
The Spring Fest.
The Spring Fest.
We know what that is.
And she goes, it's so rare for a freshman to have a solo at Spring Fest. I will say she also says that it's like a brand new school that's only been around for 4 years. And I was like, well, how rare could it be? It in fact feels like a fest that's recently been invented.
So luckily, she has this amazing school that she loves going to. However, things at home remained unstable. I heard them talking about their options. Those discussions ended with arguments. I stopped even asking about their plans. I'd basically given up hope that they'd reach their goal and hope that they could remain under the radar until I reached an age when I could help.
On the eve of May 17th, 2001, out of breath and full of dread, I unlocked our front door, cracked it open, and crept inside. Nothing has been the same since. So she gets home on this day after preparing for Springfest, and like she just felt a pit in her stomach all day. And then she gets home and her neighbor comes over and says, your parents have been taken.
She said glibly as if she was reporting the weather forecast. Obviously, she's about to like collapse. She's so upset. She's overwhelmed. She doesn't know what to do. So she calls Erica's mother, Gloria, and she's like, my parents have been taken. Even in hysteria, I was already trying to find a way to fix things, to line up a new life for myself. Can I stay with you? I asked between gasps. Maybe you can move in here. I can watch Erica for you. I'll go to school and get a job. She sighed, Diane, that's not a good idea. I don't think that would work. And so Gloria's just like, well, just stay there. Close the door. We'll figure out what to do.
Her friend Amelia calls her. She'd found out what happened. And this is something I find so interesting. No one from the government was involved.
Yeah.
No one from the government was like, okay, we are abducting this couple, but they have a minor.
Yeah, the legal citizen minor was left completely alone. And she says, they talk about all of the children of immigrants that have been deported. But she's like, I didn't seem to be a number on their equation. So how many children have been left alone? Luckily, she was 14, which is like at least an age where you can think for yourself and know who to call. But if a child was 6, 7, 5 years old,
what would they do?
Like, what if your child was in daycare?
And she says sometimes, they'll get picked up and put in the foster system, which is like also not a good option. But also in this case, she was just left. Her best friend's mom, Amelia, calls and says, just stay quiet. I'll come get you. We'll figure it out. So Amelia comes over. Her dad ends up getting one phone call from his facility and says, you have to pack a bag for me and your mom, and you're going to go stay with Amelia. She moves in with Amelia and her best friend. Also, so she locks up and secures her house. Her neighbors had started coming over trying to take stuff already.
Yeah, like she's sitting there crying, trying to figure out what to do. It's the day her parents have been abducted. And they're in her refrigerator taking her fucking fruit and being like, well, your parents don't need it. She's 14 years old. She's been orphaned by the government.
This is insane.
Poppy was driven to a facility for men, Mommy to one for women. My father was allowed to make one short call. This was it.
I'd already resolved something in my heart. I would not leave Boston.
I would not throw away the miracle I'd been given to attend Boston's Arts Academy. Getting into that school had been the greatest thing that ever happened to me, and I was not willing to give it up.
So she goes to her friend's house where she's going to live for over a year. And her friend is like, are you afraid? And she said yes. And her friend goes, that's okay.
She says, I know. What you're going through is scary. A wave of comfort washed over me. My friend hadn't urged me to be strong. She hadn't told me to stand tall or soldier on. She hadn't uttered the shallow reassurance that I'd get through this. Rather, she'd given me permission right before sleep to be the frightened little girl that I was.
At 14, I'd been left on my own, literally. When the authorities made the choice to detain my parents, no one bothered to check. I couldn't believe that my poppy, a man who'd never jaywalked or run a red light, found himself in a place like this. So she goes to visit her dad. I mean, he's just being treated like a criminal.
He's embarrassed because he hasn't been able to brush his teeth because they don't let them have toothpaste, which feels like it should be illegal.
Yeah. And then she's able to go visit her mom.
Her mom says that the guard had told her that if you're not specifically wanted for a crime, then probably someone tipped you off. And this kind of puts this paranoia on Diane to be like, well, who do you think in the neighborhood told the government about us? Meanwhile, her father thinks it was her mom's reopening of the case in New Jersey. Like, it's very beyond the devastation of being left behind. There's this other layer of paranoia of like, whose fault was it? Who turned us in? Was it my mom? Because there's also anger.
That's the thing, is you have to have somewhere to direct your anger, and it's so hard.
And I feel like that's why it's so important for her to have a book like this, because she says she's like writing this book for other children who are going through something similar. Because I feel like that is the difficult thing to hear about. Of course, we're reading this book and we have like nothing but empathy for what our parents are going through. And it's like a difficult situation. It's nobody's like fault that they got deported. But I understand that she's like, at the end of the day, I'm a child who didn't ask to be put in this position. And now because of your choices, I don't get to have parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's very angry. And I feel like that's a hard thing to verbalize, especially in a book where I think a lot of this book is to help like humanize the undocumented immigrant struggle to try to like make change in this country. And I feel like it's hard to be able to do both, to like show your full range of humanity where you're like, leave my parents alone. And also, Mom, I'm so mad at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And she does a really great job of it, of like really explaining why she pointed so much blame at her mom because she just didn't know where else to point it. And then also like coming back around and really understanding why her mom made every choice that she made. And the fact that it is the US immigration system, ultimately, that's at fault. And like predatory fake lawyers.
And the US foreign policy that like destabilizes countries in the first place.
Ain't that the truth?
Anyway, meanwhile, at school, she's still not telling anybody what's going on with her. So she is just living with her friend, going to school. Her sophomore year, actually, her friend, Amelia's daughter, joins. So at least she has a buddy.
At Boston Arts.
Yeah, but her teachers don't know what's going on with her. The other students don't know. She's just like showing up every day, having just suffered this like unimaginable loss and doing her best to sing her duets.
Yeah. Her mom wants her to come move to Columbia with her, and she says that she can't. And she has so much resentment for her mom in this moment, but also the truth of it is that she doesn't know life in Columbia, and she's like very happy at her school for the first time in her life. And she has these friends and she has this community. I think this chapter is really like beautifully and interestingly written in that she's like furious with the guards for treating her mom like a criminal. She's furious with her mom for
being detained,
being not with her.
I'm really sorry about this whole thing. My mom said, I'm so sorry, Diane. She didn't mean for her words to sting, but they did. She was sorry. My dad was sorry. The whole world was sorry, but none of it changed my situation. None of it altered the fact that by dusk, my childhood would be over, this time for real.
Tomorrow, I'd begin a new life, one uncertain and frightening, a makeshift family, a different home. So she moves in with her friend, and they are so like loving and kind to her, but it just isn't her house. And it's not her parents, and it's not her fridge, and it's not her. Like, she's so afraid of misstepping and like overstaying her welcome.
Yeah, and she's trying her best to be a perfect guest. And of course, it's like nothing can ever be enough when you're in someone's home. And she's like always scared to ask to get a snack without asking permission first. At one point, her friend Gabby goes, "Oh, you leave your hair behind." And she's like, from then on, I became like super anal about making sure none of my hair was anywhere. I couldn't wait to turn 16 so I could get a job, financial independence. That's what I wanted to create. While many girls my age were poring over fashion magazines or giggling about crushes, I was figuring out how I could make it on my own. My parents' deportation had thrust me headfirst into the world of adult worries.
So as soon as they get back to Columbia, her parents break up. "Your mother and I have decided to separate," he told me. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. My heartbeat sped up. "What are you talking about, Poppy?" I nearly dropped the phone. All the bickering, all the blaming each other for their circumstances had threatened my parents' connection for years. Deportation had apparently been the final blow.
So she goes and visits them that summer, and part of it is because, of course, she needs to see her parents, but part of it is that she's trying to give Gabby and Amelia's family a little space. She's like very aware of not overstaying her welcome. And when she goes to Columbia, she has an interesting experience because on the one hand, it's really fun to meet her extended family. There's a lot of freedoms afforded to teenagers there that are not given to them in the US. They get to go out, dance, and party. But also the relationship between her and her parents is like forever changed. One, because they're separated now, and two, because she has kind of been fully parentified. So she goes down, and it seems like her mom particularly is more concerned with her own feelings of grief over what has happened than her daughter, or at the very least, that's how
Diane interpreted it.
Yeah, so she gets down there, and one of the things that really pisses her off is her mom is kind of like, "Why'd you pack me a coat in this suitcase? I don't need a coat here. And like, you gave me 2 different shoes." And Diane's like, "Well, you know, I was 14 years old and my parents had left and I was scared. Sorry I didn't pack your suitcase perfectly." And then also she's asked to bring down all these American things like Victoria's Secret lotion and mascara and stuff as gifts. She gets there. Her mom has gotten this giant band to the airport. She's just feeling very like, what is happening here? Because of course her parents are reestablishing themselves back at home where there isn't a lot of work and there's not much for them to go home to. And they're not coming home with like savings and stuff. So it's a tough situation for everybody. But of course, Diane is the child and she feels the most let down.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, she is having fun with her cousins, meeting her aunts and uncles. But then it's also up against the poverty and you know, the situation that her parents had tried to get away from in the area that they lived in Columbia.
In the States, I hadn't witnessed that kind of hardship. I was struck with the realization that this could have been my life. Oh my God, would I have been juggling little limes too? What the fuck? This is not okay. What is going on? Save the children.
She also loves Columbia. Even with its many societal challenges, the country has this amazing energy, an irresistible vibrancy, a fervor that draws you in. her dad takes her to Cartagena
as a little trip. But when she gets home and tells her mom's like heartbroken she wasn't invited too. I mean, there's a lot of change happening in her mom's life. I don't think she expected this separation. They weren't officially married, so technically it was just a separation. But, you know, after living together and that insular of a situation too, I can't imagine.
So then back at school in Boston for her sophomore year, there's, you know, a classic 9/11.
That was hard.
That was bad. She also gets hit by a car.
And she tries not to tell anybody because she doesn't want to make a scene. She doesn't want to like bug people. That's how untended to and alone she is.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to stay as far under the radar as my family had always been. Rather than calling for help, I hobbled to the house, cleaned myself up, and came up with a story about how I'd hurt myself.
She was so cute. I have to say, she's all these pics. She's cute at 13. She's cute at 16. She's cute at 4. She's just like an adorable kid.
So then she finds out that she's going to have to leave Amelia and Gabriella's house.
She internalizes it immediately. Her good Catholic upbringing has taught you that anything bad that happens is God directly punishing you. And she's like, oh my God, me and Gabby got into a tiny little tiff. Is that why they're kicking me out? And it's like, no, Gabby's older sister got pregnant. And they're like, we just need to move her into the house. And there's just not room for her anymore. But luckily she has another friend she's going to go move in with. But still, like, it's hard for, you know what I mean? She's like, has the sense that
she's getting just uprooted and moved around, and there's no place that she can go where she feels entirely comfortable because she's always in somebody else's space.
She knows that at any given moment, somebody could make her leave, that she has no real home.
She does get a job, which really comforts her. She's making $5.15 an hour. And so then she's able to get herself a lot of food and clothes and things like that. She knows how much sending an allowance is straining her parents. She knows that staying with other people, there's only so much you can ask for. So she feels very like confident and independent having her own income.
She's starting to think about what she's going to do after high school. And she's also drifting away from her parents. She loves jazz. She loves performing. She's getting all these solos. She's considered very talented, but she just doesn't know if it's practical to pursue a career in the arts when she's already like struggling to survive. She's like, I have nothing to fall back on.
Yeah, and especially because she believes it's her responsibility to grow up and get a stable job so that she can afford lawyers to get her parents back into the country.
Yeah, she's like talking to her parents less and less. She feels like anytime she does talk to her mom, she's getting like all of her mom's life drama, and she doesn't like being made to feel so guilty. And also she feels frustrated that it doesn't seem like anybody's worried about her or like how it's made her feel. She ends up going to Colombia again for 4 weeks. And it's this similar situation where she's with her family, but she's not seeing them that often, especially because they're separated. So that time's divided by 2. And then when she is with them, she's out with her friends anyway.
And then when she's back in Boston, she's just hyper controlled, hyper considerate of how she feels that she's like lessening the burden of her presence on the family that's hosting her.
She's trying to figure out what to do after high school, and she decides to just go to a regular college. She wants to go to an all-women's school because she says, I'd experienced enough to realize that even puppy love can pull your attention away from your studies, and I didn't want even the possibility of nonsense, which is such an intense thing for an 18-year-old to say. And then she says this, which is so funny to me. I'd been reading a lot that year about Simone de Beauvoir and many other incredible feminists. Who knows why I connected my interest in feminism with going to a women's college, but I did. Okay, I feel like I know. That feels like a pretty direct pipeline. Women's college and feminism feels like it goes hand in hand. Anyway, the college, unfortunately, she goes to is like this little Catholic college, Regis, which ends up being a pretty preppy, predominantly white private college where she like takes for granted how artsy and creative Boston Arts Academy
and diverse.
Been. Yeah. And she is struggling. She does not like it. She has dyslexia.
So she gets a decent financial aid package, but still has to take out loans for just like living expenses. And she's not super connected to the university in general, but she does like find a group. She goes to Colombia for Christmas break.
And she, unlike everybody else, has to constantly be figuring out, where am I going to live in the summer? Where am I going to live over holidays? She gets a job doing like campus tours and stuff just so she can live in the dorms. She also doesn't want anybody to know what the deal is with her family. She feels a lot of shame about them being deported. So she tells different people different stories. She tells some people that they retired to Colombia. She tells some people that they died. She tells different things constantly. And at some point, one of her friends finds out the truth and is like, dude, you got to get it together. Some people think your parents are dead and some people think that they're like successful in Colombia.
She also, in her visits with her mom, is seeing her mom change a bit and like start to kind of grow up a little bit and take more responsibility and have more acceptance for what's happened and like is trying to move forward.
She remembers a specific conversation where her mom's like, well, how are things going with you? And to Diane, that feels like a huge turning point, that her mom would be like,
you're a person too?
What's going on there?
So then one of her friends is like, what if we did study abroad in London? And she's like, I obviously can't afford that. And they were like, no, there's programs. So she applies and gets in.
And has the time of her life.
An awesome time in London.
Meanwhile, she made a boyfriend. She had some job at like some fancy jeans store, and he came in and he hit on her, and he had graduated college, so he had a job and some money, and he would take her out on nice dates. And she really appreciated the attention and the wining and dining. Anyway, she takes this semester abroad. Good for her. And when she comes back, she's like, I would never want this party to end, so I'm going to go to DC next. And he's like, what about me? And she's like, well, what about you, bitch?
But then DC takes a huge turn. It turns out her financial aid package doesn't cover her DC abroad situation. So financially, she's kind of fucked and ends up taking out these like last minute massive loans to cover her semester in DC. And then she just like, I think separated, because when she was in London, she was with a core group of friends. In DC, she was pretty alone.
And she's also pursuing these things that she doesn't really care about. She knows that she wants to do some kind of advocacy. So at one point she was thinking about being a journalist, and then another time she was thinking about being a diplomat, which I don't know if that's just like a job you can have. I think that's a job you have to donate your way into.
Yeah. I've never been offered.
And I think exactly.
So previously also at school, she'd seen a counselor and been diagnosed with ADD, and they gave her drugs. And in DC, she's getting so depressed, and she thinks maybe her ADD medication is contributing to that. So she stops taking them. And now she's depressed and not able to focus on her schoolwork, and she almost fails out.
She's like drinking to numb the pain, being hungover, waking up in the middle of the day, having missed all her classes, feeling like shit. She's starting to get credit collection calls. She's in debt. She's like feeling completely helpless and out of control, and she starts cutting.
Because also once these problems start mounting with interest rates and then you still need to keep living, so you still need more money to exist, she just started to feel so on a runaway train. And so she started cutting herself pretty severely.
She ends up in the hospital, and Brian, her boyfriend, is like worried about her, but he doesn't know how to help her. It put me in control at a time when I saw myself as powerless. Although cutting didn't offer a solution to my problems, I used it as a way to calm myself down when I got out of control.
So she says that her and her boyfriend did have a lot of problems. She does not specify what those were. It seems like he might have been a bit controlling. But he does suggest that she go see a therapist, and getting a therapist is very crucial for her.
So she starts seeing a therapist, but almost immediately she's still like at her depths. And she has this night where she wakes up in the middle of the night. She's feeling overwhelmed, and she goes up onto her roof and considers jumping off. I think she's sitting on the edge and slips almost, and has this moment of feeling like, oh my God, I could have died against my own will. It's like one thing to choose it, but it's another thing to have it happen to you. And that becomes kind of a wake-up call that she doesn't want to die.
And also she then thinks about her parents and how hard they worked and how much they went through, only for her to just end it.
I knew Poppy and Mommy both adored me as much as any parent can cherish a child, and yet I felt like I didn't belong to them anymore. Like I didn't have a home, a center, a base, a foundation, a place where I was from and could go back to when things got rocky. If I had an argument with Brian, for instance, I longed to be able to go to my mother's house and talk it through with her.
She was also really ignoring contact with her parents because it was too painful to talk to them, because it felt very like fruitless almost to just like have a casual catch up over the phone when...
Yeah, she felt so unknown.
Yeah.
I don't know what I thought I owed myself, but I did know that I owed at least two people, my parents, more than this. They'd paid too great a price for me to discard my life so senselessly. It wasn't time for me to go, not like this. She also has this interesting aside that she's like, I didn't tell anybody about it because it wasn't a cry for help. She says it was just like a true moment between me and God where I had to say like, what is my path? What do I want next? And she felt like slipping and having that moment of feeling truly what it would be to lose her life woke her up to what it is that she wanted, which was to try to keep going. Because like her parents had also been in very desperate positions and they had kept going.
So she's seeing this therapist and she finishes school, and then she's like trying to figure out what to do next. She's thinking about going to law school. Even though her grades had been really bad, she decides to try to get a job as a paralegal so she can kind of like test out the legal field before she gets in even more debt with law school. And she gets a job as a bottle girl.
She's making money, but it's like a really bad environment for her just because, you know, she's drinking all night. She's kind of wearing the sexy little corset outfit. She is hot, let me tell you.
Yeah.
She's a hot mama jamma. Mama jamma. Pajama. She's a hot banana in pajamas.
Ain't that the truth?
And she's making money, but it's like everybody drinks the whole time and the hours are really, really late. And it's just not a conducive environment for getting healthy and getting your mind right.
But then she's talking to her therapist, and her therapist is giving her like a lot of good advice, a lot of good mantras, a lot of self-worth talk. Your failures don't define you. Your worth isn't about what you do or don't do. You have value because you're here. She starts thinking about like what she wants and what she wants out of life and how much she hates her paralegal gig and how much she like felt alive when she was acting. And her therapist is like, stop telling yourself you can't do stuff.
Yeah, she says, stop building these roadblocks. You have something you clearly want to do, which is act and perform and go to a conservatory or pursue that life. And you keep instead going for these other goals that are obstacles because you don't like them. Just like believe in yourself and commit. You can do anything. And I think it's really important. Lorraine, her therapist, was also a Latina woman. She was like a middle-aged Latina woman. And it was the first time she felt that she could be honest about what she'd been through because she felt like her therapist could maybe understand and relate to it as opposed to all like the older white therapists she had. That's why it's very important that we have diversity in therapy.
So she starts going to acting classes, and she has this acting teacher that she loves. She thinks he's so great. She takes a couple classes. She gets headshots. She's auditioning for everything that pops up on Craigslist. And she does some little like student films and little projects.
She finally gets some like Harvard students indie film, and it's like such a big deal. She's like, obviously, like I was barely getting paid. We shot in her apartment. It was hardly fancy. She's like, I cringe looking at myself now, but it felt so amazing to be the lead and be on camera. And she was like, it was worth it. As much as it sucked, I couldn't have done anything else. I was so compelled.
Then the film goes to the Berlin International Film Festival, and she goes to Germany to promote it, which is like pretty crazy.
So then ultimately she realizes in order to keep going, she has to move to New York. Her and Brian break up. She goes to New York. She lives in Hoboken, New Jersey. Shout out, my hometown. Isn't it crazy? I'm like, I wonder if my parents ever passed her on the street.
I wonder if you did.
I wasn't really in Hoboken too much in 2012.
Yeah, but you surely stopped by.
Yeah, maybe I saw her.
That's what I'm saying.
I would have picked her out. You know me. I can spot a pretty girl.
For a beauty.
I can spot a pretty girl a mile away.
There's not a gorgeous girl in Hoboken that Claire hasn't clocked.
If you're a 9 and up, I know about you.
In your Rolodex.
I got binders full of women.
Hold on a second. Is that a 10? Let me check my files. So she's first staying with her aunt in Passaic, and that is like a tough commute. And then she's also still working in Boston. So she is taking like multi-hour train and bus rides per day. And finally, she's like, oh no, I'm just going to go to Hoboken.
I will say it sounds like it was nice for her to live in Passaic because she said no matter how late she got back home, she'd be out for like 12 hours doing auditions and working. Her aunt would always have like her favorite meal ready for her. And I'm like, I'm glad you had a moment of family.
Yeah.
It feels like important that you had a maternal figure just up late worried about you.
Totally. She's really struggling to make ends meet. She's working all these odd jobs. At one point on Craigslist, someone is trying to buy used women's shoes. And some random guy is like buying women's shoes to sell to different pervs somewhere else.
A dealer of sorts.
She's like, you wouldn't believe it. But the guy who was buying my shoes from Craigslist wasn't even a weirdo.
He was just an entrepreneur.
Selling to weirdos.
Can I share this quote that I really, really loved actually from Zora Neale Hurston that she quotes?
Totally.
There are years that ask questions and years that answer. The year 2009 was one that asked me why I was here. The years 2010 and 2011 gave their answers. I just think something that really struck me because I think especially when you're younger, it's so easy to get bogged down in like weeks and months. Mm-hmm. But when you zoom out,
and you're like, that year was the question.
Yeah,
and then
life is really long.
Years for the answer.
Yeah, but it's like when you zoom out like that, it gives you more flexibility and it gives you more grace to find the growth and the path forward. I think if you're like, I feel like I've been stagnant for a few weeks, it's like, okay, well, in the last 3 years, when was the question? When was the answers? I just really liked that.
Yeah. It's been 7 years at this point since she's seen her family. Her parents are calling her all the time, and she's, you know, very sparse with the return calls. And she recognizes actually like the credit she gives her mom is that she says her mom never gave up. Her mom never was like, oh, I guess she doesn't want to talk to me. I'll stop calling. Her mom was always, always, always calling her a couple times a week until she was ready to reconnect. Her mom at this point had moved to Spain, and she decided she's going to go out and visit her mom. And they have this trip that ended up being very
cathartic.
It
like really brings them back together.
It didn't like fix things, but it gave them like a new direction to walk down a path together.
She says, deep down, I judged her, and I had held her responsible for the mess of our lives had turned out to be. In my mind, my father was the hero of our family's storyline, and I'd cast mommy as the villain. But seeing how my mother had changed made me painfully aware of how many years I'd locked her out, how much of each other's lives we'd missed, how weak I'd allow our mother-daughter bond to become. She'd made this big decision to change her nose as she got a nose job, and that really freaked Diane out. And I had no part in it, nor any awareness. Her life had moved on without me. It hit me that we had no real relationship anymore, only the shadow of a former one. The realization made me feel so lonely, not just on my behalf, but on hers.
I'd held her a prisoner, the person most responsible for my heartache. I'd rendered her unforgivable, and in so doing, I'd also locked away myself, a part of my soul, and any hope that she and I would ever live at peace. That night, in the dim light of my mother's living room, I made the choice to free us both.
She also says she has this moment of realizing, like, there's no fixing what was. There's only, like, meeting this new woman that my mother has become. And, like, she's like, I'm an adult, she's an adult, and now we'll meet each other where we're at and build from there.
She also really comes to the, like, recognition that despite the pain her mother's choices caused, her mom's choices didn't come from trying to cause pain. Her mom was doing what she thought was best for Diane.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets an agent in New York called Josh. Well, she gets this other agent who's like kind of a dickhead. And
I mean, she's like, you're not pretty enough for this business. And I'm like, okay, well, that's racist. Like, you don't think Diane is pretty enough? She is pretty enough. She did it. She's so beautiful. You just sound like a racist piece of shit.
But then she starts working with Josh. And Josh is sending her out on auditions.
And she's like, it's hard because I'd be in these auditions next to Nina Dobrev. Everyone says they want a fresh face, but that's until Nina Dobrev's fresh-ass face walks into the role. In retrospect, I now realize that this whole process was part of what it means to become an actor. You've got to put the time in. You've got to get out there and show casting directors who you are. And even if they don't hire you initially, they might circle back and ask to see you down the line. I know that now. You couldn't have convinced me that then. It's always much easier to see how short the process is once you've gotten to the other side.
Ain't that
it's all
truth?
worth it when you've won.
But that is true, to be like, they never want a fresh face, but you can become to them a known face before you're known to the world as a known face.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then she gets this audition for what she thinks is a web series about jail. She like has no idea what's going on.
Can I say, I was so, when she kept calling it a web series, I was like, was this supposed to be a web series? Like, what is she talking about? And then I was like, oh my God, Netflix is on the internet. I was like, they didn't know about streaming yet.
Yeah.
Whoa, I wonder what kind of money she made because they really rip people off on streaming. I wonder if she gets back ends. Probably not. But maybe it was early enough that they were still doing those deals.
I guess to me, there's a possibility that she made either like $17 or like an assload of money. And I don't know which.
I hope an assload.
Me too. So she's like, yeah, whatever. I'll do this web series audition. Her dad is like, how did it go? And she said, I gave it my all. And he said, then you've already won. And she's like, nope, you don't win until you get the job.
Yeah. Like a metaphor doesn't pay the bills. So like a job well done, a feeling of self-completion isn't helpful.
The thing is, she does get the job. So she did win.
But she's like, I really, in that moment of auditioning, she felt so good about it because she was like, I was able to channel everything I had seen in my childhood. I was able to like go into this tough, desperate character because I had seen it and I'd lived it.
So she gets this job for a web series called Orange is the New Black on Netflix.
And she shows up and there's all these big deal actors here. And she's like, what the fuck is going on? And then she describes her first day.
Yeah, that's it. The other thing is she
chaotic.
Still didn't know that it wasn't just like a random web series. And she was sitting there and being like, is that Laura Prepon?
She gets there early in the morning. They put her in hair and makeup. And then she waits till 2 a.m. till it's her turn, which is tough stuff. And she's like, I bombed my dick off. It took me 3 days to get comfortable enough to do well. But then obviously she did very well. And then they won SAG awards and they won many awards. This book was written, I think, when they're going into season 4. This book is 2016.
Mm-hmm. And she says that the cast like really bonded. Everyone had an amazing time. They were all like best palios. I felt like I belonged to a family, like I'm part of something bigger. And she also talks about how complicated it was to be acting on a show about prison when her family had like she's like, this isn't a random thing for me. It's not like, oh my God, jail costumes. She had seen her parents in these outfits. Her niece, Erica, ends up at one point getting arrested. I feel so bad for her because she feels so bad that she wasn't part of Erica's life to be a good example.
But
and
she had
like,
to save her.
You had no one, like you can't mentor your niece when you don't know like where you live yet.
She gets to be in Jane the Virgin. Her first time ever going out to LA is to be on Jane the Virgin, which is a pretty badass thing to say.
Yeah, she's like, I didn't really ever have any connection to LA. I always thought I'll go there when it calls me. And it called hard. She got an audition for Jane the Virgin. She went out there. She landed it like immediately. And then she played Jane's best friend. So at the same time, for a couple of years, she was Jane the Virgin's best friend and a recurring role on Orange is the New Black. And this was like, I think 2 to 3 years after she was like, I'm really going to give acting a go.
If you got it, she got it.
She's so cute.
She goes to Atlantic City and a man comes up to her and hits on her. And sure enough, they end up dating. He's very cute. She likes him a lot. What a spot on his end, huh?
He's just like you, Claire.
The people at home in Colombia are like freaking out. They're like, we can't believe you're on TV. We can't believe you're in the news. You're on the red carpets. We're so proud of you. She feels very proud to be part of like this Latino cast for Jane the Virgin, and then also this diverse cast that's like really shedding lights on important things like prisoners' rights and like the humanity and what happens and the abuses. And so she's really proud of the 2 jobs she's representing on TV.
Yeah, there are a lot of like Latina girls who come and take pictures with her and will be like, you really inspired me. And she can't believe how much like seeing her on TV is doing for young Latina girls.
She has an entire chapter about getting to meet Obama and the fact that Obama watches Orange is the New Black and how amazing that is.
And in a classic Obama, he's like, me and Michelle can't wait for the next season.
That guy.
He loves to include Michelle in his TV watching plans.
Is that classic Obama?
I really feel like whenever he talks about pop culture, he'll be like, well, Michelle and I.
And look at them now. Now they get to be producers. The easiest way to get a TV show on Netflix is to have first been the president of the United States.
She does this event for Cosmo for Latinas, and there she meets someone from the Immigrant Legal Resources Center, a nonprofit offering resources to people facing deportation. And she gets really inspired and says, like, you know, what can I do to help? And they were like, you could tell your story, which she's been keeping pretty much secret, except for a select group of people that she really trusted for, at that point, over a decade. And so she writes this op-ed for the Los Angeles Times, and it hits the internet like crazy. It blows up. She starts doing some TV interviews. And at first, she almost regrets it because people just are like referring to her as that girl from Orange is the New Black whose parents were deported.
She's like, to have the most traumatic thing that you're still living through every single day be reduced to like a 5-word headline is pretty painful.
And especially she's afraid that she's embarrassed her parents because they'd been really conditioned to believe that this was a humiliating thing that happened to them and not something that was like done to them by a fucked up government.
Mm-hmm. And of course, she's like being inundated with like racist hate and she's afraid. But more importantly,
she's also getting letters from people who have been in her exact situation.
And she's like the children that finally feel seen, that feel like their story is being told, that feel less alone. And she's like, even people who haven't necessarily had the immigration experience I've had, but people who have lost their parents young and just feel orphaned or abandoned, like they saw themselves in my story. And she's like, I needed to share for them.
And so because of her activism, she gets to meet Obama. Obama's like, you're doing great, sweetie. Her parents are so proud of her. She's on the cover of a newspaper in Colombia.
The last little chapter and few pages of this book are a lot of stats in defense of making a path to citizenship easier, more affordable, like how important immigrants are to this country, especially undocumented immigrants, like how much of a waste of money it would be to deport everybody and how much of like it would hurt our economy and like how important they are to
how much of a bolster to our economy and our society it is to let people be here.
And then Facebook founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg agrees. He has called immigration reform the biggest civil rights issue of our time and is speaking up on behalf of the powerless. It is really crazy to think
Mark Zuckerberg, you sociopath. Just move to space. Everyone keeps threatening to move to space. Fucking go.
She says, my desire to be of service to others is not limited to immigration reform. I have come to realize with the power of my vote that each one of us has power. Dignity for immigrants is just the beginning.
I will say, I do think that even fairly progressive people like need to consider hard their stance on immigration and like the way they advocate for it. When we posted a statement in November saying if you voted for Donald Trump, you're not welcome to listen to this podcast, we said that we think that everyone should be able to come here. You know, we said a lot of things like this podcast. We stand for a bunch of different rights, most rights. I want everyone to have rights. But that was the thing that people push back on. They go, well, not everybody.
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of caveating, especially right now with what's happening with all of the like abductions by ICE of green card holders and citizens of the US and students and stuff. There's this idea of like, well, what has their crime been? Nobody who is a human on this country
should get abducted.
Doesn't have the right to like a trial, and nobody can just be abducted. I don't care what they did. Like no one should be sent to a torture chamber without a court case. The caveating of, and they're not even a criminal. Okay, well, which criminals do you think should lose their human rights?
Yeah.
Which criminals do you think don't deserve like a fair and just case?
And which criminals are only doing that crime because they've been like stripped of all resources and dignities by the government already?
So just something to think about. I feel like this book was hard to read because it's from 2016. It seems like she's so hopeful. She's coming off of like the Obama years. And just to think about how far we've come. But, you know, we can go very far in one direction and go very far back in the other direction.
And then go very far back in the good direction.
Well, that's what I meant right now.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't like hopefully being like now back the wrong way.
I thought you meant okay. Yeah.
The tone of my voice was supposed to indicate hopefulness.
I'm hopeful.
I'm just saying things can change if people change them.
Yeah.
Anyway, who's making the most change?
By giving us 5-star reviews, you're helping people.
You're on the right side of history.
You're helping people.